Hey everyone, it's me, Lisa, and today I'm coming at you with another book review that I'm so excited about because this book deserves to be talked about. It really deserves it. So the book in question is Hamnet by Maggie Ofarell. This book was very much an incredible read, so without any further ado, let's get down to the review. So, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farell. It's inspired by the tragedy by Shakespeare, and in some ways it's similar, in some ways it's completely different, because what it talks about is the whole story behind Hamnet as a person. Hamnet is the brother and twin of another girl in a family of 3 siblings. The first one is Susanna, and then you have the 2 twins, and at some point the female twin gets ill with pox, I think, and she decays, and what Hamnet chooses to do is to switch himself with her, and so he switches clothes and everything, tweaking Death into thinking that he is his sister. So Death takes him instead of his sister. And this was already in itself a heartbreaking moment, but it's quite at the beginning. The rest of the story is all about basically time jumps between the current story of Anya, that is the protagonist of everything. Anya is the mother, and she has strange abilities to detect illness and cure illness, and she knows what people will be doing, where they will end up. It's basically kind of a Seer situation, but in a more subtle way. And Anya, she is the mother, so it's about her suffering and what she does, and next to it is the story of the father and what he does, because at some point he goes to London to a production company of theatre, and he writes plays, and he prefers it to avoid confrontation with the death of his child. And the whole story revolves around this, and I didn't want to spoil the end, but it was so great. The character of Anya is really nice. I really liked it because in the whole story, with the beautiful description of Maggie Ofarell, you really get deep into grief for a child and how Anya goes about facing it and how she ends up living with it. And this is just something that I personally cannot possibly relate to, and I have not experienced this, and I hope that me and you don't experience this in this life. But if you have experienced it, that story really goes into what it means to lose a child. And it's so much so that at the end of the story I really could feel that I knew as well, even though I don't have one and I'm not even planning on having one, but I could feel how it was. And the beauty of the story also is that one of Anya's gifts is to cure people, and she does so with herbs, and that was really nice as well, because I think that that kind of potion making and sorcery is really cool. And in most stories I've seen witches learning how to use herbs and training themselves, whereas Anya has really this feeling of how to use them and what to do to basically cure people. And it doesn't always work, but it does work most times, and I think that that was really amazing. And what I found was that in a very coincidental way, this was the second book that I was reading at the same time with The City of Brass, with characters that have kind of the same powers. They are able to sense illness, to cure illness. It was not super magical in this case as it was in City of Brass, but in this case you really have the kind of same power going on with connection to nature. And what I thought as well was that the setting of the book was 1500s, around Shakespeare time, and in this case I thought that you couldn't feel as much the difference between times then and times now, which I think that was a really added value in my mind, because grief is always grief, and grief experienced in the past would have been the same as grief experienced now. And I think that that was a really nice connecting point, because besides the differences of obviously transportation and of how people spend their time, you have this beautiful connection with grief between the past and the present, and I think that that was really nice. Side character wise, I think that Bartholomew, Annie's brother, he was really a nice character. I thought he is one of those kinds that doesn't talk much. He is huge, he is silent, but always supports his sister in whatever decision she makes, because he knows that due to her qualities she is basically always right. So I really like that of him. What I didn't like as much was his wife. I think it was his second wife that was basically seeking to have people feel bad about themselves because she felt bad about herself. And I'm very unsure why that kind of wife ended up being with Bartholomew, because he could have had so much better. But I'm very confused about that. The husband himself, he is, I think, nice, because he as well trusts Anya in what she does. He trusts her and knows about her abilities, and it's not scared off by them, and I thought that that was really cool. And the only thing is that we don't really get as much of him because he is in London so much. He does things to stay away from confronting his feelings, and I thought that that was normal, but at the same time he is, I don't know, just the brain of the whole situation. He doesn't really do actual stuff, and so yeah, that him, he wasn't as present perhaps as I would have thought he should have been. And the other children, well, Susanna is the classic I'm upset about life because I'm this age and I have every responsibility on my back, which is something that I think I can relate to from my position. When I was like 16, I was thinking that the world was against me, and even going forward she feels a bit left alone by her parents because her father is in London, as Anya is always grieving, and so I felt that she was a good representation of what the other children would face when grief is in place, because the parent is overtaken by grief and the other children have to go on without their help. So I think that that is a really good representation. On the other hand, the female twin is much more bearing of the situation, and she has a good relationship with her mother. She has similar gifts. She doesn't want to learn how to read and write. She cannot make sense of it. So I thought that that was really cool, that you have a child that is very much like the father but really left alone, and the other children that is like linked to the mother in a special way. And I thought that at some point I was not gonna like the book as much. I read another book that is called Housekeeping, where the two sisters of the stories, one of them at some point detaches herself from the family completely because she believes that her sister is bonkers, her aunt is bonkers, and she believes that she deserves better. So she completely detaches herself from the family, goes to live with other people, and develops basically a career completely outside of them. She doesn't talk to her sister at all, and that I thought was very mean, and it kind of ruined it for me. But in this case, Susanna at some point goes back to live in the common house with her sister and mother, and she finds a way to deal with her mother by closing the door. She shuts out that aspect of her mother, the grieving aspect that she doesn't want to deal with, but at the same time that you keep the connection with the family, which I really felt was appropriate. And what to say, the ending, oh my god, it left me speechless and crying. So I really felt that the whole book comes around in the end, and I loved it because I really love the style in which it's constructed, because you get moments in the past and in the present, and I really love that from different characters since it was written in third person. And then you get at the same time this beautiful description that goes along the whole book. I really love that. I think that in this case Maggie O'Farell really nailed everything, and I couldn't complain about it. I think it really was the best. So I read it. Why? Because it won the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I thought, well, let's give it a read. And wow, I'm speechless, and I really think that it won for a reason. And I also own another book that is one of the finalists to the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I want to see what that is about. So you will have a video coming after this at some point where you will have that book also. And so I really hope that you liked my description of it and you liked what I told you about it, because I think that if you haven't read it, you really should, because it's emotional, it's nice, and it's really a work of art in some ways. So I really cherish it so much. So I really hope you liked this review, that you will decide to stick around and subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment with saying if you would like to read this book at some point. And we will see each other in the next video. Bye guys!